Reality Riffing, so excited to release this interview that I did with two of my main men, the Peace Dealer and Ricky Williams, talking astrology, transits, 2020. I think we touched in on the election. We did some real talk about using astrology and what that means, and also some reveals about all of our personal astrology. It was really an amazing talk, and I can't wait to sit down with them again as a part of our Interstellar Star School. We are coming up on a very, very powerful cosmic window, and I wanted to make sure that you get this information right here on Reality Riffing. Welcome back, Interstellar Star School. I am joined by two amazing men and astrologers, Ricky Williams, who is a dear friend and has a really amazing story that I can't wait for him to tell you, of how he went from a Heisman winning NFL player to an astrologer and a healer. Ricky, thank you so much for being here. So happy. And also very excited to be joined by Michael Nnebe, a.k.a. the Peace Dealer. Michael, many people were really excited that you were joining us today because they love your content and just your take on what's going on in the world. Thank you for joining us.
And thank you for having me. This is a supreme honor.
So wonderful that we could be here. And of course, I already told you guys, but I am calling this, my unofficial name of this panel is Real Men Not Only Do Astrology, but Are Astrologers. And so I would love to just start with both of you sharing a little bit about why astrology clicked for you and what kind of your process of realizing that it was a language that you spoke and that you wanted to learn and share, and would be happy for either of you to start, whoever wants to.
Well, yeah, right off the bat, I'm once again very grateful. This has just definitely been like an ever expansive, ever growing adventure ever since I've been put on this path. Definitely a great reminder that spirit always just walk with us as we uncover the mind body spirit trinity. But yeah, I mean, what kind of led me on my path was actually, I kind of like to think of myself kind of like Saul, where Saul turned to Paul and he was like, persecuting Christians, and then he saw the light of Jesus and became Apostle Paul. I kind of relate in that what got me on my astrological journey was that I took my Christianity so much more serious in 2011. Which ironically, my whole enlightenment was timed by my Jupiter transit. Like once it transiting my first in Taurus, I was raised Christian my entire life. So my mother is also a fellow Gemini, and I've kind of had a strict conservative influence, which I'm very grateful for. So, I mean, come 2011, there was like certain end of the world prophecies. Harold Camping has said that Jesus was going to come back. And I didn't necessarily believe that, but I had at that time, a DUI charge that unfortunately I never really even did. The police officer lied about the police report, and this kind of woke me up to the corruption in certain aspects of the system. Yeah. But I was asking myself through that period, if I died, would I go to heaven? Like, was I living a life that was truly Christian? I would consider myself a lukewarm Christian. So I rededicated myself back to Christ, and I wanted to become a theologian so that I could actually apologize the faith and understand where people come from instead of shoving the doctrine down people's throats. I wanted to meet people where they're at and introduce Christ into their lives. And I was studying the Bible so that I can, learn how infallible it is. Ironically, that I learned it's not really the infallible word of God. I started to realize more so the inerrancy in translation errors. Yeah. And it's eventually what led me to see it as a very, valuable book of wisdom, but helped me release the indoctrination of feeling that, these are real stories as opposed to them being an astrological allegory. And it was around this period where I was like, well, like, I was kind of having a mini identity crisis, because it's like, my identity was wrapped into Christianity. And I didn't realize how at the time the principles of Christianity aid in what I do, as far as like the golden rule and having integrity and whatnot. But it's just very fascinating. Around that time, I started watching horoscopes. I don't even remember what caused me to, but I had always been into Myers-Briggs and personality profiling. And it wasn't until I joined Soul Garden with Christopher Witecki and I got my astrology chart read by him and David Palmer, also known as Leo King, that was my first experience, like having my chart read. And that was it for me. Like, I didn't know there was a system that allowed you to like so accurately connect and get to know people. And I just got so passionate about learning it. And, I became a writer in Soul Garden for the Gemini clan. And, that's what led to me eventually, creating my first YouTube channel and making horoscopes and getting into the craft. So it's just very, very fascinating.
Really cool. And obviously there's so many people I talked to who had this kind of 2011 galactic center transit moment and then add a Jupiter transit to it. And, these are awakening times, as well as 2020, obviously. So, I love these stories. Ricky, will you share your kind of astrological awakening story?
Yeah, so I'm sitting here listening, and I have a couple of tears running down my face, because it's almost like copy and paste, probably 70% of that story.
Wow.
Yeah. So I grew up in a Christian family, very Christian. I'm a preacher's kid. My dad was a minister. My dad's dad was a minister. My mom's dad was a minister, and I was in it. When I was a kid, my role model was Jesus, and I remember sitting in church and listening to stories and really identifying with Jesus and kind of wondering why everyone else was there when they didn't seem to really be identifying with Jesus, and more putting him on a pedestal. And so, hit my teenage years, kind of drift away from religion and really get into sports. And that becomes really my identity, my religion, if you will. And it wasn't 2011, it was 2004. And it was a Jupiter transit, Jupiter hitting my ascendant. And I'm a Gemini, and my mom is Gemini rising. So, again, a lot of the same story. And so Jupiter hitting my ascendant, same time as my lunar return, same time Uranus is squaring my sun. And I have this awakening, and it was triggered by reading the Da Vinci Code. And as I read the Da Vinci Code, I got to the end, and it was a similar experience where that thought came in, the permission to question everything I've been taught, to look at it with different eyes. And within a couple of months of that awakening, I realized that there was more to my life story, to my quest, than just being a football player. And so I retired from football, and I went on a quest. And one of the things that I was obsessed with in this whole process was really trying to understand the life of Jesus Christ. This reawakening of wanting to reconnect to this archetype. And I ended up traveling, ended up in Australia, meeting this interesting guy named Stephen, who lived in the swamp, and he had a Bible. And again, parallels in the story. The name of this Bible was the Peshitta Bible. And the relevance to me was realizing that there were mistranslations in the Bible, right? Again, this idea of questioning my roots. And he let me borrow this Bible, and I started reading the Bible again, and it spoke to me in a different way, and I could see it alive in my own life. And I came across a verse in Matthew, and again, I had left. I retired from the NFL in the height of my career, gave up everything. And I'm in the middle of the swamp in Australia, and I read this Bible verse, and it says, if you give up family, home, everything, and look for me, it will all be given back to you in return. And it was like I I felt okay. I felt like I was in the right place at the right time. And following that path, I started to realize underneath the helmet, underneath the football player, that I really was a healer, that I had a need and an ability to show people a different perspective, Gemini, and to touch their heart with my Cancer moon. And we were talking yesterday, Guru Jagat, about this part of the story where I ended up studying Ayurveda in Northern California, and I took a yoga class, and it just blew my mind. That the level of peace that I experienced from that class. I went to the teacher and I said, "Where can I get more of this?" And he was a Swami. He said, "We have an ashram down the road. Come check us out." And so I went to the ashram and I took a class. And after the class, the head Swami in the ashram walked up to me. Someone had told her I was a football player, and she asked me where my Mars was. And I kind of looked at her sideways, and I knew that Mars was a planet, and I kind of sensed she was talking astrology, but I had no idea what she was talking about. And so she asked for my birth information, and we had this 3-hour conversation. And again, at this point in my life, I'd been a football player my whole life. I was kind of in this space of realizing that I'm kind of a healer, but I don't know what my future holds. And in this couple-hour conversation, I felt more seen than I'd been seen in my whole entire life. And something about this tool of astrology that she used to get to connect with me, I just sensed there was something powerful here, and I dove in, really wanting to understand how to master this tool. And I was 16 years ago, and it's been an amazing journey, and it's an up and down journey. There's sometimes you feel like you're starting to get on the scent of it, and then it completely disappears, and you feel so lost. And that just to keep going back at it and keep going back at it, it's like you have to earn your way into unlocking the symbols. But it's such a rewarding journey.
Wow, thank you both. And I wasn't planning on telling this because I have a Scorpio rising, but I do want to, just because it's fascinating. I grew up on kind of my Jewish mother became a born again Christian in the 80s, and she passed out, started speaking tongues when she got baptized in the Christ, the blood of Christ, and she, we lived on it was an open-minded, but it was like a Quaker and Christian kind of commune, just a normal childhood. And so that was, I actually used to imagine that Christ himself was my father. Like I had such a, kind of relationship with Christ. And then also found astrology as a child. It was like kind of the only thing I wanted for my birthday. When I turned 10, like you used to be able to, kind of pay whatever $20, and they would send you in the mail your all of your write-ups and kind of a very pedantic interpretation of your chart. And I remember just like that night getting it and reading it, and I felt like it was really kind of some sort of mirror into my soul. So these sciences, I think, we're connected to them over long. It's more than just this lifetime, or however you want to look at it. So really beautiful to hear both of your stories.
What is your sun? If your sun's sign, if you don't mind my asking.
I'm a Virgo, and Ricky, I was going to ask you guys because there's the thought that Jesus was a Libra. In the yogic sciences, we say that he's a Virgo, that he's actually born under Virgo. What do you guys? I mean, where do you land on Jesus's natal chart?
I actually just recently came to this realization. First of all, I was not a believer that Jesus had a natal chart because I felt like I didn't feel like Jesus was real. I felt Jesus is like Spider-Man. So it's like, the sun. Right. But I just realized that Jesus archetypally is supposed to represent Virgo, actually, just like the Virgin Mary, manifesting the Christ of Leo into Virgo. And I just find it very fascinating. I mean, just this stage of the journey, being able to see, I reached a place where now I'm like, the language of astrology like speaks so boldly, it makes me wonder what we're stepping into, because you set this call up and like it can't be a coincidence that Ricky and I are both Gemini, but he has his moon in Cancer, I have my moon in Capricorn. So it's literally like a mirror effect, which is just like, wow.
Yeah, and I said
That's all.
to Ricky the other day, I was like, I really think you and the Peace Dealer have like a connection. I had this intuitive hit, so I didn't know that part of it. But what do you think, Ricky? Have you thought about Jesus' natal chart?
Yeah, Virgo sounds reasonable, and when I talk about like the age of Pisces, I talk about the archetype of the mystic, and the two examples I use of the avatars of the Piscean age are the Lord Gautama Buddha and the Lord Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
and this idea of Pisces and in a sense, sacrifice, but really transcendence. And the story of the Buddha is, his dad was a rich guy and he was going to inherit. And he said, no, I'm going to give it all up, go in the forest and connect to something greater. And very similar theme with Jesus' story. Yeah. And Pisces opposes Virgo. And I think really what I'm starting to appreciate is to think astrologically is to think holistically. And in the opposition of signs, it's really an axis. And so you can't have Virgo without Pisces. You can't have Pisces without Virgo. And so definitely it makes sense that he's born on this axis.
Actually, adding on that, I had just came into awareness yesterday that there are only 6 zodiac signs as far as like the opposite of a sign just completing.
Exactly. Yeah,
which is very fascinating.
Yeah. What do you think about, this 13th sign theory of this kind of that week in between Scorpio and Sagittarius, that first week of Sagittarius being kind of like this kind of grandmother spider, the Arachne? Have you guys gone into this at all?
Actually, it's super fascinating, the duplicitousness and deception around it, because when it first started coming out, one thing that's so interesting is they always say that this is a new discovery. They put out this article this year and last year and the year before. And so they want to put out to the public because they know the public is generally very deceived about astrology. Yeah. And it's actually this that put me on the fence and made me realize, okay, maybe these people just aren't in the know. And it's this that made me realize, oh, no, this is deliberate disinformation, because what happens is they've actually been pushing this as a new discovery since the 90s, and they recycle this story as a new discovery, which makes me question, why is NASA pushing this information when they don't have any real astrologers on their staff? So a fucus is a constellation, which ironically recently blew up. So it's of course in between Scorpio and Sagittarius. And I was thinking that you can think of it as a decan in between Sagittarius, but I'm actually wrong because it's a constellation. So I'm not sure if it was Galileo, but the whole the reason why it became a zodiac sign, or because the reason why people said it was a zodiac sign in the first place is people who weren't astrologers saw this in the constellations and assumed that astrology is based off of the constellations. Right. Hence, the sidereal system and Vedic. And unfortunately, fortunately, it's based off of the ecliptic and the relationship between the celestial equator and, of course, the sun's ecliptic path. So this is actually what gives us 12 signs and 360 degrees, because the zodiac that we experience is based off of that 360 degree ecliptic path the sun travels, and the seasons that are created with the intersection of the equator, so hence the seasons. And so my son, when I was born, was actually in the constellation of Taurus. Right. But the reason why, my son's actually in Gemini is because I was born before the summer solstice in spring. So, but yeah, the whole fucus propaganda is deliberately pushed for people to now feel like their zodiac sign is invalidated, and to really take people's power away and them not take this serious as a craft. And my bad, what I wanted to add on this was I actually made a video thoroughly debunking this, because this had came out earlier before. And so there's astro.com has 2 very fascinating articles breaking this down. And I put this video out. It was only until later I realized YouTube magically deleted it. I didn't even get any warnings. And then I saw a video with Bill Nye on Now This speaking on, astrologers, it's not worth it for you to spend your money on astrologers. Basically controlled opposition. He was saying Ptolemy made astrology, and then he was saying that it's not true because of the precession of the equinoxes and the constellations. So I made a video point for point debunking everything that Bill and I said, and Ophiuchus, and YouTube magically deleted the video.
Magically.
Poof. Right. I had to find out later and upload it again. So it's very crazy, you know, the lengths they're going to keep people deluded about this.
I mean, I'm not surprised. Bill Nye is like such a CIA agent. So, I mean, that's just like, duh, if anybody isn't paying attention to that. You know, I remember one time I was trying to get a roommate here in, when I first moved to LA, and, you know, we put it on Craigslist at the time. And some guy showed up, and I mean, he looked like exactly like Bill Nye. And, you know, I was like 20 some years old, just looking for a roommate. And this basically, you know, lettered undercover agent showed up, and he came in and he looked in my refrigerator, but he looked exactly like Bill Nye, so that's how I got cleared off on that. But no,
wow.
You know, this is interesting because one of the things that I knew had changed about astrology was actually one of those disinformation campaigns came out, this article that I didn't know they were putting out again and again, but when it came out, it was like 2013 they put it out. It was a big, I mean, it was trending on Twitter and all this kind of stuff, and I realized, wow, more people believe in astrology than it kind of brought out a lot of secret belief in astrology. So you kind of saw the opposite as well, of people who never spoke about astrology prior to 2012 were freaking out because they, you know, whatever, their sign had changed because of this kind of mind control op. What do you think, Ricky, anything on this?
Well, I mean, yeah, I pretty much have, you know, copy and paste, same answer. And it's just misinformation.
Yeah. And
people that understand astrology, well, I'll say this. What it poses a question that allows people to understand astrology at a deeper level. Is most people, even people that quote unquote take astrology seriously, I don't think they appreciate what it is. And it's a symbol system, and it's a language. And in the story I told, I learned about astrology in an ashram, in a Hindu ashram. And so I started off learning Vedic astrology.
Right.
And you know, I went to, and you know, you started off saying real men, you know, are astrologers. And in India, it's true.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
if you're an astrologer,
awesome.
like people look up to you. And so I was very fortunate to really learn astrology in that environment. And then, you know, I came back to the States and I met, of course, in Aquarius, a Vedic astrologer who used the Western Zodiac, who used the tropical Zodiac. And so I really loved his stuff. And so I dove in and I started reading it, and it just came alive and it started to click. And so I slowly crossed over and you know, became a Western astrologer. And so I have an appreciation for the different zodiacs. And in India, you know, if your moon is in Taurus, or if the moon is in Taurus, and you go outside and you look up in the sky, the moon will be either in or right next to the constellation of Taurus.
Yeah.
It's based on the constellations. But the tropical zodiac, tropical meaning seasons, is based on the seasons. And so in the tropical zodiac, 0 degrees Aries is not when the sun is at the beginning of the constellation Aries, it's the first day of spring.
Right.
And so, you know, I tell people, when people say that you're an Aries, it's not this woo-woo thing. They're saying that you were born the first month of spring. And if you're a Taurus, you were born the second month of spring. And if you really think about this, you can understand the qualities, you know?
Right.
An example here is the planet Venus. You know, the planet Venus is the planet of relaxation, calm. You know, it's a planet that helps us, like, tolerate Earth, you know? things that give us pleasure and give us a sense of security.
Yeah.
And so if you think of the two signs that Venus rules, you have Taurus, which is the second month of spring, and you have Libra, which is the first month of fall. If you think about this, the weather, the climate during those two times of the year, it's cool. It's almost like the perfect weather, you know? In spring, in second month of spring, you have the flowers. So you have the visual, you know, you can go outside, you can spend time in nature. And then in the fall, you have the leaves turning color. It's starting to cool down a little bit, you know? So again, it's a symbolic system. And I think it's natural in us because it was created based on natural observation.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Noticing that at certain times of the year, it was a good time to plant crops. At certain times of the year, it was a good time to pull crops. And just starting to take note of these different correlations and passing it down over time. This is the definition of science. You know?
Yes. Yes. That is so very, because I mean, that's one of the biggest contentions. They want to make this look pseudoscientific or religious, because like you can look at it as not science, or you could look at it as something to believe in, which both are erroneous, because you don't believe in English, you know English. So
right.
It's, yeah. And I'm very grateful for you, Ricky, because I was on the fence of if Taurus was ruled by Venus and Libra, and you just kind of confirmed it. They do rule both them signs. Yeah.
You know, one way to think about it, and my wife and I were talking about this last night, is the Venus, the Taurus side of Venus is more the appreciation of natural beauty, you know? So like the appreciation of food or nature, you know? The appreciation of touch. Okay, and Earth sign, and Libra is the appreciation of the idea, the beautiful idea. So art, you know, and thinking like when we fall on the shadow side of Libra, is we get connected to the appearance, right, to the idea of what something represents. Yeah. Whereas Taurus, when we connect, it's that feeling of I feel comfortable and connected to this person. You know, it's more of a body sense of attraction.
And it's also important to establish, scientists have proven that seasons do affect your temperament. So if we know that astrology is based on seasons, this gives legitimacy to why your zodiac sign affects your personality.
You know, I was just speaking this morning about, you know, in the yogic sciences, we talk about when you're in utero, it's really the most, it's the time where you can teach your child the most in utero, from basically the 4-month to 7-month window. And in astrological science, there's a lot of talk about what happened magnetically and cosmically and astrologically while you were in utero, the prenatal eclipses, and then as well as obviously the actual natal chart. I'm curious what you both have experienced or think about this, because I do feel that when you're dealing with psychomagnetic energy and how it forms a nervous system or a frequency, this kind of prenatal time before you were even born is also an informant of the actual natal chart.
Yeah, so you know, I'll take a stab at this one. So you know, there's a work by a psychiatrist named Stanislav Grof. Did a lot of work with LSD therapy, and he would work with patients for at least a year, and then he would once a year he would dose them with LSD, and therapy would go deeper, obviously. Yeah. And so a lot of his work was around, he called them the 4 birth matrices. And just these different times in the prenatal, and you know, he says 24 hours after birth is like the 4th matrix. And what he found was, regardless of what happened in those first 3 matrices, if when you're born, you're born into a loving environment that feels safe, then it can correct all of those imbalances. Okay, and so the way I think about this astrologically. First of all, astrologically, the way I look at it is I look at planets that are within the last few degrees of the 12th house. All right. Because if you think of birth being the ascendant, then those last degrees of the 12th house represent what happens before the birth.
Wow.
Guru Jagat, your chart is a really good example because we're not always sure about birth times, but according to your chart, that Uranus is right on is the very end of the 12th house.
Yeah.
So this would indicate some kind of seismic shift going on with your mother, in the weeks leading up to your birth.
Yeah.
And so again, this idea where I look to the very end of the 12th house to get an idea of what might have impacted the fetus, and then I look at the ascendant in the first house to get a sense of how can the immediate environment either exacerbate or ameliorate those prenatal effects.
Fascinating.
That is profound. And I'm assuming mean like the degrees right before the AC as far as the natal house. That's so profound. And thank you, because that makes a lot of sense. And appreciate your question, because you've helped me make sense of what a specific chart was. I never really used it or understood it until you asked this question, and it's the prenatal eclipse chart.
Yes.
That's like right before you're born.
Yeah.
I used to look at it like, okay, that's cool. But now it makes sense that this will show the conditions that led to you being born, what was destined to happen. And it's only until recently I'm starting to see the significance in nodal transits, because, I mean, it's very profound.
Can you talk about that? Because, obviously there are listeners out there and on all sorts of different levels of understanding of like the jargon, but can you break down some of that for people listening?
Absolutely. So to my understanding, I know recently I actually did a synastry report the other day, and this was between an Aries sun and like a Virgo sun. And one was a Gemini moon, the other was a Sag moon. And their composite chart, their combined chart, their nodes meet together at Gemini and Sag. And so I asked them when they first met, and he told me it was around like 10 years ago. And that was when the nodes originally aligned there. And then they met again recently when the nodes realigned back. And I started to look at the similarity and patterns. And there's another person, there's another friend I know who, when I met her, when I was even aware of her, our nodes were aligning. And so this is really, it had me accept really the inevitability of destiny and looking at it as destiny, fate, and karma. So I like to look at karma as cardinal, fate is fixed, and destiny is mutable. And if destiny is the North Node path, that's the experience of your fate. We know that fate is fixed. So whatever's fated to happen is meant to happen. But you can change your destiny by changing your perception around your fate. And karma is the actions that lend into how you fulfill your destiny, or what karma goes into that. But it's definitely allow me to accept at some level that, kind of like a video game, we have free will in the decisions we make, but a lot of the levels are predestined. And once you realize that we do flow with destiny, it allows you to just flow with spirit so much more smoothly and freely.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is what, at least for me, is at the heart of astrology even making any sense. Is once you start studying astrology, and everyone that studies astrology is blown away by the fact that there's something there. And once you start studying it, it poses a lot of really complicated questions. Like, is my life predestined? Do I have free will? And I think in order to really do this work, in a way that helps people, you have to have some kind of answer to that question. And I think it ties very much into the nodes, and very much of my astrological practice is rooted in the nodes. And when we say nodes, we're referring to the south node and the north node of the moon. And these aren't actually planets. These are places where the ecliptic meets the equator. And so it's the place where eclipses occur. Okay, so if you look at an eclipse, you'll always see that the sun and or the moon are going to be close to the nodes during the full moon and the new moon. So, and this is a big part of Vedic astrology. In Vedic astrology, they consider the nodes planets. Rahu and Ketu are the names in Vedic astrology. And so what the south node represents is the past, and the north node represents the future. And all of the planets have nodes, but in astrology specifically, most people use the nodes of the moon because the moon rules our emotional body, our emotional nature. And if you think of the idea of what survives, okay, now we're getting into reincarnation, of what survives death, it's not our Mercury or our mental memory of our address or our name. It's more of what touched us, what affected us, you know, what touched our soul, what do we carry over with us? And this is what the moon represents, the deepest, most sensitive part of ourselves. And so the south node of the moon gives us information about our past, what we bring from the past. And the way that I was trained is we look at this, kind of from the south node from a side glance, because it's what we've done in the past. It's what we've done and we've done and we've done. And we can do it, and chances are we have a talent at it, but it just can't really help us move forward in our evolutionary path anymore. An example in my chart is my south node is in Aries conjunct Mars, and professional football player. It was natural.
Yes, yes.
And
awesome.
So in the north node, and I have a slightly different take on the north node. My teacher Steven says the north node is, again, it's not a planet. It's a symbol, and what the north node represents is a good idea. I read recently, and I love this way of thinking about the north node. Is the north node is the first step, meaning that whatever is going on in your life, right, whether things are great or things are difficult, and you're not sure what's the next step to take. If you take a step towards your north node, it's always going to lead you towards your destiny. It's always going to move. It's always going to move you forward. And I really like that, and I really appreciate that, because one way to think of the south node, it's habit, it's those habits that don't help us get anywhere. And the north node is always the opposite sign of the south node. And so, if you always move towards the north node, you're going to be moving out of old habits, degenerative habits, and into your evolutionary path. And so I really love talking about the nodes, and it's amazing. The technique I use is I'll create a story around the south node symbolism in a chart. And the idea of the story is to create a metaphor that helps someone connect to these habits, because when you're sitting across from someone and you're just pointing out all their bad habits, they have like a south node in Aries, you have an anger problem. Or in my case, south node in Aries in the 8th house conjunct Venus, you can't keep it in your pants.
Right.
I also have Mars and Aries. I can
six kids and 4 mothers later.
Yeah.
I got the message.
Got it.
And this is the south node. It's what we naturally gravitate towards because it's easy. It's the habit.
Yeah.
And so the north node is a challenge because it's where we tend to feel awkward. It's so new. And again, your chart, Guru Jagat, is fascinating whenever you see the sun in the same place as the north node, because it's like it ties your evolutionary path forward into your identity in this life. It's my teacher says with that configuration, there's a lot at stake in this lifetime.
Yeah.
Feel you. What's your nodes, Michael?
I thought that was dope. I'm like Ricky, I'm also South Node Fire in Leo and North Node Aquarius. So I've always been, I remember back before I knew that my moon was conjunct Saturn in Capricorn. As a kid, I was Ebenezer Litterbug in World Day. And I was into theater and acting, and I didn't realize I was supposed to take those theatrical talents and use them to become an astrologer and more focus. I know the challenge for me is to be less introverted and be out there collectively and get off the South Node Leo throne for sure, or whatever self-absorbedness I may fall into, and get out there. But yeah, very, very, very honored. And yeah, I also have Mars in Aries, so I definitely experienced
we know what's going on around here.
I want it now. I don't care.
What happens later.
Yeah.
I love my Aries. I have so much Aries around me. I have first house moon, but I surround myself with Aries because it's just ready to go.
So your moon's in Scorpio?
Moon is in Sag in the first house.
Sag, okay, awesome.
Yeah. Which is a little bit of a save my ass kind of thing there. We're happy about that because I laugh at my own jokes. I amuse myself endlessly. So it's kind of
awesome.
I'm self-contained.
Yeah.
So I would love to, I could just talk to you guys forever. We're going to have to do more of this. But I would love to talk about some current events, just because we're coming up on a Mars retrograde. We've had all these retrogrades this summer. Obviously, 2020 unprecedented, and astrologers have been talking about it for years. And then we have another big eclipse season, and then this winter solstice, Saturn and Jupiter. Conjunction on the 20th of December 2020. So just anything that you guys want to lay down about what's happening. I did a whole thing on election astrology, and it's going to be a rough little election season. So I'm just curious, anything you're seeing, anything you think's relevant for people to know about what's happening in 2020.
Well, right off the bat, one thing that astounded me ridiculously, first of all, thank you so much. Like my heart is just filled with so much purpose right now. Like this is all happening as it's meant to be. We're all at the right place at the right time. So when you say that this Lion's Gate is an ancient activation of DNA, it just hits home so well. I've felt for the longest time that we're all headed into just such a great awakening of supernatural potential and power. So when we think about March 20th, we know for a fact that, and this is fascinating for me to actually say vocally, but we as a collective saw the enactment of the literal apocalypse. And if we think about cycles, a date to reference would be March 23rd. If you look at planetwatcher.com and you look at the planets of March 23rd or March 2023, what you're going to see is the end of the Pisces cycle moving into Aries season, Saturn moving out of Aquarius into Pisces, and then Pluto moving into Aquarius. And we've seen this theme of we know the individual signs are Aries, Taurus, Gemini, and Cancer, and the social signs are Leo, Virgo, Libra, and Scorpio. 2010, Saturn was exalted in Libra. And ever since 2010 to 2020, we've gradually, slowly but surely seen a departure from social activity. By 2018, 2019, we really had no major main energies in social signs. And once Saturn went into Aquarius, we started to see, limitations, Saturn in collective settings like censorship and quarantining. And so it might seem like a whole lot is falling apart, but America's having its Pluto return and there's no social energy. So this is why it's starting to be limited. So we know that cycles in astrology are started through conjunctions. And March of 2020, we had Mars, the god of war, exalted in Capricorn. We had Jupiter, which is abundance, but we know that it's at its fall in Capricorn of material resources, which would represent famine. And then we have Pluto, which is pestilence, which is crazy because now, on an unrelated note, H1N1 in 1912, I think, happened when Jupiter and Pluto were conjunct in Cancer. And you see it, right? You see a pandemic where Pluto is being expanded with Jupiter. And then the H3N2 was Jupiter conjunct Pluto in Virgo. And so now we see this in Capricorn, another pandemic. We know Saturn is all about literal engineering, which pretty much shows that this virus was man-made and like planned. And so like, which would make sense if you see this as an apocalypse. Pluto's pestilence, and then Saturn could be the reaper, death. So why is this significant? We know that the apocalypse is the end of age. And so this is literally the cycle that is ushering humanity into the new age of Aquarius. And that has everything to do with this awakening of ancient power in our DNA, which is why they want us divided. They want us to fight each other. They want us to accept these, I call it the quantum invasion, because we're dealing with forces you can't see and that want to basically annihilate our genetic potential, which, you know, it's weird to say, but like, if you don't know who you are, and if you don't move right, you will die. If you don't die physically, you'll lose the essence of yourself, which is still like the same as death. So very fascinating. And that's why I'm so grateful that, you know, I could be anywhere right now, but I'm here with both of you, walking the path. So that's just amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you. Wow. You're laying it down. Mic drop. Ricky, what are you seeing?
Well, you know, the first comment is, you know, we talked about two Gemini suns dropping knowledge, you know, one moon in Capricorn, right, sensitive to these larger structures. One moon in Cancer, sensitive more to the subjective inner experience of all these things that are going on. And usually when astrologers get excited about what's going on, it usually has to do with what we call the outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And briefly, the reason they're called the outer planets or the spiritual planets or the transpersonal planets is because, you know, there's a debate on how long astrology has been around, but for most of the time astrology has been around, astrologers use seven planets because they're the ones that could be seen with the naked eye.
Right.
So in the late 1700s, you know, shortly after telescopes are invented, the planet Uranus is discovered right between the American and the French Revolution. 1840, late 1840s, Neptune is discovered. 1930s, Pluto's discovered. So these were discovered later. And because they're further out, which means they move more slowly, and they tend to correspond to movements or generations, things that function at such a high frequency. Most people involved in their personal lives don't really pick up on those vibrations.
Right.
They kind of work unconsciously and they sweep us into certain things. Okay, and so this idea of cycles, and for me, to truly understand what's going on now, you have to understand the different levels, okay? And the deepest level I start at is the idea of ages, moving into the Aquarian age, all right? And there's debates on when we moved in, but the idea is we're super close if we're not already in the age of Aquarius, okay? And so this larger cycle, right? So there's this larger shift that's going on in humanity. I mentioned earlier about the archetype of Pisces, the mystic, sacrifice, transcendence, okay? The Buddha, Jesus, you know, we can understand the past 2,000 years through that archetype.
Right.
Aquarian archetype is very different. It's about individuality. You know, who am I as an individual? What is my unique gift? Very different than giving it all up. And so in this shift, right, we have to break free of the old Piscean ways of doing things and start to embrace and move into the Aquarian shift. Okay, so that sets the stage. All right, now we come to the next level of the cycle. Is the slowest moving planet is Pluto. Pluto takes, you know, around 250 years to go around the chart. So we have this next cycle inside of this bigger theme. Okay, and Pluto's job is to make the unconscious conscious. You know, bring these things to the surface, right? And the idea is once they come to the surface, the idea is we can transform them, we can heal them, we can move beyond them. But if they stay buried, they just create crap from this deep surface. So certain experiences, intense experiences have to happen to bring all the shit to the surface so that we can, again, ideally do something about it, okay? So each sign that Pluto moves through, it brings all the crap associated with that archetype that's built up in the past 250 years or so since Pluto's been going around, brings it up to the surface so that we can deal with it and hopefully move beyond it. Okay, and we think of, you know, Capricorn and the Piscean age. First thing that comes to me is the the inversion of the feminine sign Capricorn, right, the boss, into the patriarch, right?
Wow.
Right? That at its core, Saturn is a fertility god, right? It's about the Earth, and so one of the things that Pluto is bringing to the surface is all the crap around the patriarchy, right?
Yeah.
And we've been seeing that the past several years. We're seeing all this stuff about white supremacy, right? As part of the patriarch. All of this stuff, these are our financial institutions, our government institutions. Pluto is bringing all this stuff to the surface. And I think as all these planets, start to move into Aquarius, we're going to start to hopefully see changes implemented. But I think so much of the Plutonian thing is are you re-traumatized by this stuff when it comes to the surface? Or if you've done the work to work on yourself, you have the ability to respond to it, okay? And this brings me to, I think, the most important point here. Again, the Cancer moon here is the inner subjective experience of what is going on, right? So when all of this really started to hit the fan, my initial reaction was, start meditating again, right? Start meditating again. And this brought me back to a time in my life where I felt like everything was going crazy. And in that time of my life, I meditated and I used the energy of the time to deepen my connection to myself. And it gave me the clarity and the vision, not only to navigate or deal with the difficulties, but to make the most out of them. I truly believe that life happens for us. It doesn't happen to us. And so from a subjective perspective, and again, South Node in Aries, the warrior, I see all of these things from the environment as an internal challenge for me to make the best of. And so, my type of astrology, it's not so much dealing with what's going on in the environment, but the opportunity that what's going on in the environment affords you to grow and to evolve.
Yeah. Very profound.
Very profound. I mean, I do feel like this whole Capricorn thing. I'm just, I'm finishing my book around what it looks like to be a bad feminist, I really want to just call it bad feminist, but I think I can't. I think that this Pluto in Capricorn is all about kind of the mask of some of these movements of what looks to be liberation, but is just another kind of mask in this Plutonic Capricorn awakening. And I think it's really fascinating to just see all of those masks kind of being pulled off and in all of the current events, and I mean, if you're paying attention, that is.
It gets even crazier because we know ever since Jupiter was in Scorpio, it started to bubble and reveal like the Weinsteins and a lot of the sexual deviancy, and now in Capricorn we're starting to see the Wayfarers and this in corporate structure. So we know for a fact around this time, literally 1776, there was Revolutionary War. We also know that the last civil war that we had in this country, I believe Neptune was leaving Pisces and going to Aries, and Uranus was getting ready to enter Gemini. And, we're kind of seeing a return of this cycle, which is bringing a revolutionary civil war. And so with the whole abolishment of with that whole rhetoric of abolish the police, one thing that I see moving into Pluto Aquarius is at some point a temporary destabilization of law and order, to where you don't really call the police to settle your issues anymore, in a sense where it's streamlined across the city. And I really do believe that vigilantism and bounty hunting is just going to skyrocket because people are going to put justice into their own hands. And might see that all over the world. And it's like the test of the Saturn and Pluto Aquas. We all actually literally have to come together or kind of let that chaos. It might be like a natural reset where the chaos kind of brings in a new natural order or whatnot. But we're dealing with globalists and people with huge resources that have simulated this, beta tested this, and have planned this. And 2020 was one huge beta test, just to see how we react. So, I mean, it's very intense. Very intense.
Yeah, I was listening to, I'm sure you're familiar with Young Pharaoh,
Yes.
And I was listening to something he was talking about on a panel of astrologers. Well, kind of there was astrologers and other kind of freedom fighters of different sorts. But he was saying that one of the big business things that he's created, that he's launching, is kind of this private security firm that is taking a lot of people who have been trained on the streets and who are trained warriors, not necessarily military, but that as well, post-military, but also just street trained warriors to become private security people. So I was thinking about that when you said
genius.
that. Yeah, it is pretty genius. I have to say, he's going to make a lot of money in this next moment, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I just feel like I feel like we've done this a lot before, and we could talk forever. And I'm really just so honored to have you both to be able to do this. And I hope we can do it again, because I think there's a lot more to be uncovered. But would love to just, for both of you, just tell people how they can find you, how they can get readings with you, how they can get more of you. Would you tell them?
Yeah, I'll go first. So yeah, I'm on Instagram at Williams. Not sure how I got that, but I got it at Williams.
It's a good one. It's a good one.
Yeah. And I mess around on Twitter every once in a while. And on Twitter, I'm at Rick the Laureate. And if you want to book a reading, you can go to my website, which is rickywilliams.life.
Wonderful.
I'm sorry, this is very surreal because shout out to Lisa Sarah. She is a friend I know, and she's always telling me, like, oh, I need to take you to Ricky's parties and introduce you to him. I'm actually doing it.
Yeah.
Right. This is so amazing. So, I mean, I'm on Instagram as The Peace Dealer and YouTube as well. If you go to thepeacedealer.com, you can schedule a consultation and report. I currently have some discounts. If you use the discount code DIAMOND, you'll get 30% off all reports.
Nice.
And if you use the code HOOKUP, you get $300 off of any consultation. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And also, Ricky and Linnea, his wife, have an amazing herb and spagyric company called Real Wellness. Just to give a shout out to Real Wellness. Is it at Real? It's at RW. What is Instagram?
Instagram is at Real Wellness Herbal.
At Real Wellness Herbal, but they have amazing, really healing things and healing different types of formulae. So thank you both so much, and I would love to do it again. So if you guys are up for it, let's plan for another combo at some point.
I'd be honored. Yeah, likewise.
Would love it. All right. Thank you for your work, and thank you for your teaching today, and thank you for everything that you're doing in the world.
Likewise.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Reality Riffing. These are conversations that I think are important with people who are doing great things in the world about subject matters that need to be discussed. If you enjoyed the content, the conversation, please feel free to share with your people, share with your friends and family, rate the podcast below, and also subscribe.